Now, this is breaking news from the WCCO Live Desk on CBS News Minnesota.
I'm Maria Lazignoli with breaking news. A group of local law enforcement leaders from across the Twin Cities Metro are holding a news conference. They say they're addressing concerns regarding interactions between federal agents and Minnesota police officers.
Behind me is a bunch of amazing police chiefs that are here in support of a very short but very important message that we want to share with you. What you won't hear from any of us today is the rhetoric of abolish ICE or that there shouldn't be immigration enforcement. The truth is, immigration enforcement is necessary for our national security and for local security. But how it's done is extremely important. In fact, we have a long history of working exceptionally well with our federal partners, including ICE agents, and we have seen the best of them perform their job extremely well in the past. With that said, recently, as the last 2 weeks, we, as law enforcement community, have been receiving endless complaints about civil rights violations in our streets from U.S. citizens. What we're hearing is they're being stopped in traffic stops or on the street with no cause and being forced to demand paperwork to determine if they are here legally. As this went on over the past 2 weeks, we started hearing from our police officers the same complaints as they fell victim to this while off duty. Every one of these individuals is a person of color who has had this happen to them. In Brooklyn Park, one particular officer that shared her story with me was stopped as she passed ICE going down the roadway. When they boxed her in, they demanded her paperwork, of which she's a U.S. citizen and clearly would not have any paperwork. When she became concerned about the rhetoric and the way she was being treated, she pulled out her phone. In an attempt to record the incident, the phone was knocked out of her hands, preventing her from recording it. The officer had their guns drawn during this interaction, and after the officer became so concerned, they were forced to identify themselves as a Brooklyn Park police officer in hopes of slowing the incident and de-escalating the incident down. The agents then immediately left after hearing this, making no other comments, no other apologies, just got in their vehicles and left. I wish I could tell you that this was an isolated incident. In fact, many of the chiefs standing behind me have similar incidents with their off-duty officers. This isn't just important because it happened to off-duty police officers, but what it did do is we know that our officers know what the Constitution is, they know what right and wrong is, and they know when people are being targeted, and that's what they were. If it is happening to our officers, it pains me to think of how many of our community members are falling victim to this every day. It has to stop. This behavior erodes the trust that these police chiefs have worked tirelessly for the last 5 years and theoretically the last 60 years to stop this exact behavior from happening. Now, I want to be really clear. I've called lots of other ICE agents and HSI agents and have talked to a lot of individuals about this. This is not widespread. This is a small group of agents within the surge in the metro area that are performing or acting this way. As a matter of fact, as rumors of this had spread, I've received phone calls from ICE agents and HSI agents indicating this is not how they act, this is not what they do. Regardless, we're calling to action that we have more supervision over the surge, that this type of civil rights violations have to stop.
We've had employees for our city that have experienced some of the same things. Thankfully, not with firearms drawn, but traffic stops that were clearly outside the bounds of what federal agents are allowed to do. We recognize by standing here today that some might say, you're only speaking up because this is happening to the cops. Others will say that we're speaking out against ICE, and that means we want rapists on the street. Neither of those things are true. We want to find some common ground. Law enforcement has more authority than a general citizen. That means we have more responsibility in how we behave. We have to find common ground here, and we have to figure out a way that these processes, which are clearly failing if American citizens are being grabbed or stopped or seized, This can't happen. We have to make sure that everyone's civil rights are intact. I truly want to believe that there isn't anybody on either side of the political aisle that thinks that people's civil rights aren't important. They have to be the cornerstone of everything we do. Yesterday, our country honored Dr. Martin Luther King, and I was struck by the fact, and I'm paraphrasing, but he once said, "We must learn to live together as brothers, or we will perish together as fools." We can't be foolish. We can't be those fools. So we are asking that we come together and figure out a way for this state and this country to resolve these things before things get any worse.
Just yesterday, our nation honored the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a man who challenged us to at least remember the history, not only to remember history, but also live in its lessons. The theme of this year's MLK Breakfast, make a career of humanity. And that is what myself and others are trying to do. We're trying to make sure that humanity remains in the noble profession of policing. As I know what it feels like to be stereotyped, judged, and profiled, I know firsthand what it means to be seen before being understood. Our nation, and particularly our agencies and state, have worked hard to confront the wrongs of the past. The work that has never been perfect and is still a progress in the making. We know that we have a lot more to do, but there has been real progress, and it's very important that we do not lose sight of that. But today, unfortunately, we are seeing that progress erode. I am seeing and hearing about people in Hennepin County stopped, questioned, and harassed solely because of the color of their skin, solely being the operative word here. This is not okay now, and it's never been okay. And now, that same discrimination is also spilling into the law enforcement community. Dr. King reminded us that the time is always right to do the right thing. And for those of you in position of leadership, now is not the time to be quiet. When we have concrete examples of profiling, we need to do the right thing. We cannot let people in our communities think that our local law enforcement leadership is okay with the actions that we simply know are not just only wrong, but illegal. We can't just say this is a noble profession and not treat it as such. So what does it mean to be noble? It means someone admired for a high moral character, showing qualities like honesty, courage, generosity, honor, and often acting in unselflessness and integrity. Integrity, one of the pillars of this profession. 5 years ago, our city, specifically Minneapolis and Hennepin County, became ground zero for civil unrest. Since that time, local law enforcement has been doing the hard, necessary work to rebuild trust within our communities. Rebuilding a community and an environment where people should feel safe. Rebuilding our law enforcement agencies with the people who honor the humanity that we want in our communities. You see, trust isn't just an abstract idea. Trust means victims of violence feel safe, calling 911. Trust means witnesses coming forward, crimes getting reported. Trust means that communities welcome law enforcement as partners in their community. You see, we just don't want to be a part of our community. We want to be partnered with our communities. And what's going on now is stifling that progress. And on a very basic level, trust means parents are not afraid to let their children go to school or church. Business owners are able to open and thrive off of their hard work of being business owners. The trust is fragile right now, and it is essential. It is an essential element to public safety. Today, that trust is being damaged, broken, by the questionable and sometimes unethical actions of some federal agents, particularly in these last recent weeks. I want to be clear that I am not saying all federal agents, as all of us know that we have become victim. If somebody or one person in law enforcement does something wrong, we all pay the cost. We cannot afford to be stereotyping or generalizing anyone. Our communities have less trust in all law enforcement when this happens, not just the federal agents, but our local law enforcement, and we're here to stay. Those harmful actions causes a ripple effect through all of our professions and through all of our agencies. What I want to assure you is we are here because we all believe that our jobs are to be done professionally, lawfully, and obviously treating people with dignity and respect. Not just marginalized communities, but every single person who calls Minnesota home. This moment is the time to do what's right. We demand more from our federal government, more professionalism, more accountability, more humanity. We demand lawful policing that respects human dignity. We should not be at a point in this profession or any profession where you have to teach people how to treat people. This is the same demand we have for our own public safety professionals who serve, live, raise their own children in our communities every day. I can tell you at the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, our deputies will continue to serve and always have professionally, lawfully, and with the respect of every person's humanity, as I'm sure all of these agencies that are represented here today are also doing. And with that, we will all continue to show up, even though times are hard, even though our law enforcement is exhausted. They're being challenged. They're having to go home and face their own families and answer these questions. We are lucky to have men and women in this profession that continue to show up despite the adversity.
The reality still remains is that the Constitution applies to everyone. And we have, and I think it's echoed, with the speakers that we've had today, we have federal ICE officers that are in their line of duty, right? They have to do what they do, right? I mean, they're ordered to do so, and they're carrying out those lawful efforts. And what we see, though, is we see people that are obstructing in that. As a lawyer, that's still a violation of the law. What we can do is we can talk about the tactics and the emotion that's there, and there's a place for that, and that place is to be discussed a lot, and also in the courtroom. And so to give pause that what's happening here, there are mechanisms in place. There are lawsuits that we all know about. We've seen them almost every day. Something's going out. Those will play out in the court. But what cannot happen is video after video of our local law enforcement officers being yelled at and threatened to by the public when they're simply there to work on behalf of the community. And I've heard from dozens and dozens of officers, and I've seen those videos. That can't happen. And that's what is increasing this temperature. It's the rhetoric and what we're seeing.